What if your entire dynasty was on the brink of extinction? No brothers, no heirs,
I'm gonna be a dad.
How about no?
no second chances. In this video, I will show you 9 characters in Crusader Kings 3 who are the last of their bloodline, the final hope of once great houses. And now it's up to you to bring them back from the brink of extinction. Number 1. Matilda of Tuscany, 1066. In Crusader Kings 3, few characters feel as legendary as Matilda. Born in 1046 into the powerful house of Canossa, Matilda was the daughter of Bonifacio IV, Margrave of Tuscany, one of the most influential nobles in northern Italy. Her family controlled vast lands stretching from Lombardy through Tuscany, effectively dominating the road between the Holy Roman Empire and the papacy. But her early life was marked by tragedy. In 1052, her father was assassinated. Soon after, her brother died and her older sister passed away as well. By her teenage years, Matilda stood as the sole surviving heir of the Canossa dynasty. Her mother, Beatrix of Lotharingia, acted as regent and later married Gottfried the Bearded, Duke of Lower Lotharingia, tying the family even closer to imperial politics. Matilda grew up educated, politically aware, and unusually prepared for power in a world dominated by men. She became one of the central figures in one of medieval Europe's greatest conflicts, the investiture controversy. This was the explosive struggle between the papacy and the Holy Roman Emperor over who had the authority to appoint bishops. Matilda was a fierce and unwavering supporter of Pope Gregory VII against Emperor Henry IV. Her lands became the front line of this ideological and military war. In 1077, one of the most iconic moments in medieval history happened at her castle in Canossa. Emperor Henry IV, excommunicated and politically desperate, stood barefoot in the snow for 3 days seeking absolution from the Pope. That event, the walk to Canossa, cemented Matilda's lands as the stage for Europe's power struggle. Militarily, she was no figurehead. Matilda personally led troops, commanded fortresses, and fought imperial forces multiple times. Though she suffered defeats, she remained resilient and politically formidable throughout her life. Matilda never produced a surviving heir. Her marriages to Gottfried the Hunchback and later to Welf V were politically strategic but ultimately childless. When she died in 1115, the direct line of the House of Canossa effectively ended. Her territories became the subject of disputes between the papacy and the empire, and the great dynasty that once controlled central Italy faded into history. Number 2. Ubbe Ragnarrsson, 867. Ubbe was one of the leaders of the Great Heathen Army, the massive Viking force that invaded Anglo-Saxon England in 865. Medieval chronicles, particularly the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle, describe him as a fearsome Danish warlord. Later, Norse sagas go further, identifying him as a son of the semi-legendary Viking hero Ragnar Lodbrok. While Ragnar himself straddles myth and history, Ubbe is firmly attested in contemporary records. The Great Heathen Army wasn't just a raid, it was an organized conquest. Its leaders, Ubbe and his brothers, Björn Ironside, Halfdan Whiteshirt, Sigurdur Snake in the Eye, and Ivar the Boneless, systematically dismantled the Anglo-Saxon kingdoms. They captured York in 866, crushing the kingdom of Northumbria. Over the following years, East Anglia and Mercia fell under Viking control. Ubbe is particularly associated with campaigns in Mercia and Devon. In 878, he led a Viking force that landed in Devon, possibly aiming to link up with other Norse armies. There, At the Battle of Könnuit, his forces were surprised and defeated by Saxon troops. Ubbe was killed in the fighting, and according to later sources, the famous Raven banner of the Viking army was captured, a symbolic blow to the Norse invaders. Ubbe's death in 878 came at a critical moment. The same year, Alfred the Great defeated the Vikings at Edington, halting their total conquest of England. From that point forward, Norse rulers would settle, convert and adopt, or be pushed back. Number 3. Otakar IV, 1178. Born in 1163, Otakar was the final ruler of the Otakar dynasty of Styria, a noble house that had risen to power in the southern eastern frontier of the Holy Roman Empire. His father, Otakar III, had significantly expanded Styrian territory and elevated its importance within imperial politics. By the time young Otakar inherited the march in 1164, Styria was no minor borderland. It was a growing regional power wedged between Austria, Hungary and the Alpine world. But Otakar's life was defined less by conquest and more by survival. In 1180, Emperor Friedrich Barbarossa elevated Styria from a margravate to a duchy, making Otakar IV the first Duke of Styria. This was a major political achievement. It meant direct imperial recognition and greater autonomy within the empire. For a brief moment, the Otakar house stood at its peak. There was just one devastating problem. Otakar had no heirs. But still, he suffered from a debilitating illness, leprosy, which made it clear that his line would end with him. Unlike many rulers who hoped for a miracle son, Otakar had to confront political reality. In 1186, he made one of the most consequential decisions in Austrian medieval history, the Georgenberg Pact. Through this agreement, he arranged that upon his death, the Duchy of Styria would pass to the Babenberg dynasty of Austria, specifically Duke Leopold V. Rather than risk fragmentation or civil war, Otakar orchestrated a peaceful dynastic transfer. When he died in 1182, the Otakar dynasty ended. Styria passed into Babenberg hands, reshaping the balance of power in the Eastern Alps and laying foundations for the later rise of Austria as a dominant regional force. Number 4. Ælfwine Haroldson, 1066. Ælfwine Haroldson represents one of the final flickers of Anglo-Saxon royal blood after the Norman conquest. He was the son of Haraldur Harefoot, a Norse king who ruled England during the turbulent years after the death of Knut the Great. Knut had created a vast North Sea empire that united England, Denmark and Norway under one crown. But after his death in 1035, that empire quickly began to fracture. Haraldur Harefoot was one of Knut's sons, though his claim to the throne was controversial from the very beginning. His mother, Ealhgith of Northampton, was not recognized by everyone as Knut's lawful wife, which made Haraldur's legitimacy questionable in the eyes of many English nobles. At the same time, another claimant existed, Harthacnut, Knut's son by Queen Emma of Normandy. While Harthacnut ruled in Denmark, Haraldur seized the opportunity and gradually took control of England, first as regent and then as king in 1035. His reign was short and unstable. England was divided between supporters of Haraldur and those loyal to Harthacnut and Queen Emma. Tensions rose further when Haraldur's supporters captured and blinded Alfred Atheling, a rival claimant from the old Anglo-Saxon royal house. The act shocked the kingdom and deepened the political crisis. Haraldur ruled for only about 5 years before dying suddenly in 1040. Almost immediately, Harthacnut invaded England and took the throne. In a brutal display of vengeance, Harthacnut even had Haraldr's body dug up and thrown into a marsh before it was later reburied. This sudden reversal destroyed Haraldr Harefoot's line of power. His son Ælfwine Haroldson never ruled and effectively disappears from the major political stage. Surrounded by rival dynasties and the restored rule of Harthaknut, the brief branch of Knut's dynasty that Haraldr represented simply faded away. Number 5. Aliénor of England, 1178. Few medieval rulers lived a life as dramatic, powerful and politically influential as Aliénor of Aquitaine. Born around 1122, Aliénor was the daughter of Guilhem, Duke of Aquitaine, ruler of one of the richest and most cultured regions in medieval Europe. Aquitaine wasn't just another duchy, it was enormous, stretching across much of southern western France, and its court was famous for poetry, troubadours and chivalric culture. When her father died in 1137, Aliénor inherited the entire duchy, instantly becoming one of the most desirable and powerful heiresses in Europe. That same year, she married Louis VII of France, making her Queen of France. The marriage united Aquitaine with the French crown, but it was never truly stable. Aliénor was strong-willed, politically active and far more independent than many queens of her time. She even accompanied Louis on the Second Crusade, traveling all the way to the Holy Land. The crusade ended in disaster, and tensions between the royal couple only grew. After nearly 15 years of marriage and only 2 daughters, the union was annulled in 1152. But Aliénor had to move on quickly because of the Rapouillea abductit. Just weeks later, she married Henry II of England, the young and ambitious ruler who would soon control a vast network of lands stretching from England deep into France. Through this marriage, Aliénor's inheritance became a cornerstone of what historians call the Angevin Empire, one of the largest political realms in medieval Western Europe. As Queen of England, Aliénor remained deeply involved in politics. She governed Aquitaine in her own right and supported her sons as they grew into powerful rulers, including Richard the Lionheart and John, King of England. Her relationship with Henry II eventually collapsed into open conflict. In 1173, Aliénor supported a rebellion by her sons against their father. The revolt failed and Henry imprisoned her for nearly 16 years. Yet even imprisonment did not end her influence. When Henry died in 1189 and Richard became king, Aliénor was released and once again became one of the most powerful figures in the kingdom. She governed England while Richard left for the Third Crusade and continued to manage the complex politics of the Angevin realm well into her old age. Aliénor died in 1204, leaving behind a legacy unlike almost any other medieval queen. She had been Queen of France, Queen of England, ruler of Aquitaine and Crusader, a prisoner and the matriarch of a dynasty that shaped European politics for generations. If you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications to see more content from me. Number 6. Raja Manadeva. Seriously, you still didn't subscribe?
Why are you gay?
Number 6. Raja Manadeva IV of Nepal, 867. Raja Manadeva IV of Nepal represents the fading end of one of South Asia's oldest and most historically influential dynasties, the Licchavis. Manadeva belonged to the ancient Licchavi dynasty, a ruling house whose origins stretch back over 1,000 years before his time. The Licchavis were already prominent in northern India during the age of the Buddha, ruling in the region of Vaishali as part of a powerful republican confederation. Over centuries, branches of the dynasty spread across the Himalayan region, eventually establishing a kingdom in the Kathmandu Valley. Under the Licchavis, Nepal entered one of the earliest documented periods of its history. From roughly the 4th century onward, they oversaw the construction of temples, the spread of Sanskrit language, and the development of trade routes linking India and Tibet. Their rule helped shape the cultural and political foundations of medieval Nepal. But the Lijhavis were not only important in Nepal, they played a major role in the rise of one of India's greatest empires. Of the Gupta Empire, the Emperor Samudragupta was born to a Lijhavi mother. Because of these prestigious lineages, Samudragupta proudly referred to himself as Lijhavi Dauhitra, meaning the son of the daughter of Lijhavis. The connection gave the Guptas additional legitimacy and prestige, helping cement their authority as they built what is often called the Golden Age of classical India. By the time Manadeva IV ruled in the 9th century, however, the power of the Lijhavi dynasty had long been in decline. Internal struggles, shifting trade networks, and the rise of new regional powers weakened their grip on Nepal. Eventually, their rule collapsed and the political landscape of the Kathmandu Valley fractured into smaller, competing kingdoms. Number 7. Anangapida of the Karkota dynasty, 867. Anangapida ruled Kashmir during the final years of the once powerful Karkota dynasty, a royal house that had dominated the Himalayan region for centuries. He belonged to the Karkota dynasty, which rose to power in the 7th century and transformed Kashmir into one of the most important kingdoms of northern India. The dynasty's founder, Durlabhavardhana, established the family's rule after marrying into the previous royal line. From this beginning, the Karkotas gradually built a powerful and sophisticated state centered in the Kashmir Valley. The dynasty reached its greatest heights under the legendary king Lalitadita Muktapida in the 8th century. Lalitadita expanded Kashmir's influence far beyond the Himalayas, launching campaigns across northern India and Central Asia. According to the famous Kashmiri chronicle, the Rajatarangini, his empire stretched from the plains of India towards regions bordering Tibet and Central Asia. Whether or not every conquest described was permanent, there is little doubt that Kashmir under the Karkotas became a major political and cultural center. During this golden age, Kashmir flourished as a hub of art, religion, and scholarship. Monumental temples such as the Martin Sun Temple were constructed, and the kingdom became a meeting point for Indian, Central Asian, and Tibetan influences. But by the time Anangapida came to power in the 9th century, the dynasty was already weakening. Successive rulers struggled to maintain control over powerful nobles and regional governors. Court intrigue, internal rivalries, and economic pressures gradually eroded royal authority. Anangapida's reign marked the final stage of this decline. The once dominant Karkota dynasty lost its grip on power, and soon after his rule, the throne passed to a new ruling house, the Utpala dynasty, bringing centuries of Karkota rule to an end. Number 8. Yelü Zhílugu, 1178. Yelü Zhílugu ruled over one of the most unusual and far-reaching successor states of the medieval world, the Karakitai, also known as the Western Liao dynasty. He belonged to the Western Liao dynasty, a continuation of the Khitan-led Liao Empire that had once ruled northern China. After the fall of the Liao to the Jurchen Jin dynasty in the 12th century, remnants of the royal Yelü clan fled westwards into Central Asia. There, under leaders like Yelü Dashi, they carved out a new empire stretching across modern-day Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, and parts of Xinjiang. This state was remarkable, a Chinese-style imperial dynasty ruling over a largely Turkic and Muslim population, blending cultures, religions, and administrative systems. At its height, the Karakitai dominated trade routes across Central Asia and stood as a major power between the Islamic world and China. But by the time Yelü Zhílugu came to power in the late 12th century, the dynasty was already under strain. Internal instability had begun to weaken the ruling house. One of the most dramatic episodes before his reign involved Yelü Pusuan, a powerful regent who dominated the court. Her rule ended violently when she was executed by Xiao Walila, plunging the dynasty into further instability. Zhílugu inherited a fragile empire, one still powerful but increasingly vulnerable to both internal intrigue and external threats. Even within his own family, sacrifice and instability defined the path to power. His elder brother is said to have been killed by Zhílugu. According to Juweni, he was sacrificed in order to secure new sovereign. But the greatest threat would come from outside. In the early 13th century, a new figure entered the stage, Kuchluk, the son of Tayan Khan the Weak. After the defeat of the Naiman by Genghis Khan, Kuchluk fled west and sought refuge within the Karakitai realm. At first, he was welcomed, but Kuchluk would ultimately betray that trust. He usurped the throne and would go on to become the last ruler of the Western Liao. Number 9. Wallada of the Umayyad dynasty, 1066. Wallada bint al-Mustakfi is one of the most fascinating and unconventional figures, a princess of a fallen caliphate standing among the ruins of her dynasty. She was the daughter of Muhammad III of Cordoba, a ruler of the once mighty Umayyad Caliphate of Cordoba. This caliphate had been one of the most powerful and culturally advanced states in medieval Europe, ruling over much of Iberia and rivaling the great Islamic empires of the East. But by Wallada's time, in the early 11th century, that golden age was collapsing. The caliphate was torn apart by a brutal civil war known as the Fitna of Al-Andalus. Rival factions, warlords and competing claimants fought for control, shattering centralized authority. One by one, Umayyad rulers were overthrown, assassinated or replaced, until the caliphate itself dissolved into a patchwork of smaller Taifa kingdoms. Wallada's father was one of these short-lived caliphs, ruling briefly before being deposed and killed. With his fall, the power of the Umayyad dynasty in Iberia effectively came to an end. But Wallada's story did not end in obscurity. Unlike most women of her time, she became famous for her independence, intelligence, and cultural influence. In Cordoba, she established a literary salon where poets, scholars, and intellectuals gathered. She was known for composing her own poetry and for openly defying social expectations, refusing to veil and expressing herself with unusual freedom. She is also remembered for her relationship with the poet Ibn Zaydun, one of the most celebrated literary figures of Al-Andalus. Their romance and eventual falling out became legendary in Arabic poetry. Yet, despite her cultural fame, politically, she stood among the last remnants of a shattered dynasty. The Umayyads, who once ruled Al-Andalus, had lost everything: their empire, their authority, and their place at the center of power. Wallada represents a different kind of last of their house. Not a warrior or conqueror, but a survivor of a fallen golden age. You begin not with armies, but with legacy, the memory of a dynasty that once ruled Iberia. And from that memory, you have one chance to rise again, or fade into history like the rest of your house. And with that, we are done. Thank you for watching this video and I hope you enjoyed it. Was I successful in convincing you to play one of these rulers? Make sure to let me know in the comments. Also make sure to say what would you like to see next. And who knows, it might just happen. Stay safe and I'll see you next time. Bye. 10:15. 10:15. Nem, 11:15, bazd meg. 11:15. Matilda never produced... Nem, ez nem. Matilda never produced a surviving heir. Nem, ez se jó, nem a faszom. Matilda never produced a surviving heir. Ubbe is Ubbe, nem Abba, nem Ubbe. Ubbe is particularly associated with campaigns in Mercia and Devon. In 1180, Emperor Friedrich Barbarossa elevated Styria from a margravate to a duchy. Haraldur Harefoot was one of Knut's sons, though his claim Haraldur Harefoot was one of Knut's sons, though his claim to the throne was controversial from the very beginning. But Aliénor had to move on quickly because of the Rapui Abduxit. But Aliénor had to move on quickly because of the Rapui Abduxit. By the time Manadeva IV ruled in the 9th century, however... Jesus Christ, bro. Manadeva. However, the power of Lichav's dynasty had long been in decline. By the time Manadeva IV ruled in the 9th century, however, the power of the Lichav's dynasty. Ez olyan jó indult. By the time Manadeva IV ruled in the 9th century, however, the power of the Lichavite dynasty had long been in decline.